Hey y'all, welcome to the Devon A. Morris Unfiltered Call-In Show. Have a seat. Let's get ready. You have any questions? Come on, call in. Come on to that Discord channel. Do me a favor, get the unfiltered crew some finger snaps. We're ready to get started here. Mondays, 8 p.m. Every single Monday, we're here. I'm excited about it. Are you? Let's get this show started, y'all. The greatest Scrum show on earth. I'll see y'all soon. Enjoy. Hello. We are here once again. Time to do the show, people. If you don't know me, my name is Devon Morris, and this is the Unfiltered Call-In Show, where we will answer your questions related to Scrum, Agile, entrepreneurship. I don't know. Maybe you even have a couple of personal questions that you may have. I just saw a spider coming down, and I don't want to be Spider-Man, so I don't need a spider to bite me, so I had to smack it out the way. It probably isn't radioactive since it's in the house, but you know, I just don't need it to bite me. I'm not trying to. Would be cool to have those kind of powers. Anyway. Hopefully everybody's been having an amazing. You had an amazing weekend, and you started your week in an amazing way. Hopefully those two things are very accurate for you. So if you are on LinkedIn, do me a favor. Just drop a hello in the chat for me. Just drop a hello. Say hi to me. Wave to me or something like that. If you're actually on YouTube, say hello to me. And I'm saying hello to everybody right now. So just drop a little hello, wave, put your thumb up, finger up, whatever it is. Just don't curse me out or anything like that. I might get a little bit offended. So anyway, I spent my weekend doing stuff with my daughter that's up in Chicago, so we had a great time. Just getting back to this week, it's like I was wow from the weekend, people. Had to put my car in the shop and, just got things that you got to do, right? Put away comic books that was really valuable. So I'm really excited, right? And today, let's see. Well, first of all, let me talk to you about what we got going on. So let's talk about what we're going to talk about first. Our conversation today is going to be about your mid-project, and then somebody maybe forces you, maybe you're trying to, you have to switch over, do Scrum or some other agile method. Mid-project, mid-effort, you have to make that transition. What's that like? I'd like to talk to you all about what's that like. And, maybe a couple of things that you have to consider, right? So I want to say, John, hello, how you doing? Patrick, as usual, hello, welcome. And welcome to anybody else that's showing up, anybody that's going to show up later. As you may or may not know, how the show works is really very simple. I'm here to answer your questions. If there are people here that want to join and get a question answered, you just throw it in the chat. Or you are welcome to join the link that I just dropped on the channel. That link right there will actually bring you to a green room, and in that green room, you wait till I pull you into the show, and then we'll have a conversation, and I can answer your questions at that point. I always, for call-ins, take priority. So I'll attempt to get to any questions that you may have in the chat, but priority will always start with the call-ins. That's how it's always worked. That's how it will continue to work. Last show, we spent the entire show talking to someone, right? Probably 30 minutes talking to somebody about what they had going on, and maybe we had some good ideas, and hopefully they're trying those things out, Miss Maylene. Hopefully that's very, very true. But the ideas, we'll talk about that stuff in a minute. We'll talk about at least that starting Scrum mid-project. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Let me tell you what I got going on so you at least know that. This week is a chill week for me. I'm actually preparing for future classes, like preparing for CSP, preparing for the the advanced CSPO. So I'm preparing for those future classes over the next couple of weeks. There's a few things I need to clean up, so I'm doing a lot of preparation. Other than that, probably my next class is going to be on April 18th. You got CSM CSPO, then after that, advanced CSM CSPO, then after that, CSP. So 3 weeks straight of just banging it out, knocking it out. Next weekend class is like May 17th, right? In terms of CSM CSPO. Other than that, got a lot of private stuff happening. But, you want to join the CSM CSPO class, go to beardedeagle.com to join us. You see Bearded Eagle, at the bottom of the screen somewhere. You see DAM, Devon A. Morris Unfiltered, there as well, that logo. So, that being said, you're welcome to join anytime, right? So, here's the deal. Let's start having a conversation here. Let's start talking about this. I haven't written any notes, anything like that, because I just wanted this to be off the top of the head. Have I been in situations where we've started working in a more non-traditional way, and then someone probably who has a little bit of power, has a little bit of say-so, comes and says, bam, we're going to change and we're going to move forward in a different direction. I want you to start doing Scrum on this immediately. Okay? Now, Scrum is basically a way that you're going to deliver, right? If I think about Scrum and I give you my definition of Scrum, this is not the official definition, but this is what Scrum is in 30 seconds, right? A time box plan that you evaluate daily, and then you learn about what you built, and you learn about the process, and you do it again. That's all Scrum is in 30 seconds. Like literally, you take everything else, you strip everything else away from it, and that's what you get when you're really talking about Scrum. Nothing more than that. So you can apply Scrum to a lot of different things, right? A whole ton of different things you can actually apply Scrum to. But here's the deal. Hey, Kiara, how you doing? Here's the deal. If you're working in probably a non-traditional way, you probably started building things in a way that would be good for you, right? Let's see. I may have someone that could be joining me here, so we may have to come back to the conversation, but let me go ahead and deal with the caller. So we'll come back. So let me deal with, let's have a conversation. So caller, John, I'll be with you in just a minute. So you have a situation where you're actually forced to start. You're forced to actually start Scrum. How do you deal with that is the question, right? Because everything that you've done prior was built to be delivered a certain way. So, for example, a classic way of delivery that exists in a lot of organizations is what we would call a traditional waterfall, where you kind of plan everything and then you just do all of one part of the life cycle and then you move on to the next step. So you might complete all the requirements before you move on to design or development or testing or anything like that, right? So you may have a plan like that. But here's the problem with that plan as you try to make a bounce or you make a jump over to something like Scrum. Your first big problem is requirements, right? Your requirements don't match because you have requirements that are built to be delivered in a very different way. So you might have requirements that could take you months to actually deliver. Well, if you're doing Scrum, you're probably doing 2-week sprints, a month at the most, maybe a week, right? Or 3 weeks or something like that. And now you have these things that you're going to have to try to divide into part 1s and part 2s and part 3s or whatever. One of Scrum's core values is to deliver working product every single sprint. To deliver working product every single sprint. So if you really want to get to the essence of what you need to do, you want to actually be in a position to be able to deliver working product. So at the end of a particular sprint, if something actually just stops and it halts, right? It just halts, right? in that traditional way, you might have a bunch of stuff that you can't use. So, first thing is that I found that I have to start taking every aspect of the life cycle or every aspect of what's being impacted and start to look at it. The biggest thing that I could tell you to do, the number one piece of advice that I would give you is to do what I would call recasting of requirements. Now, I'm making this up, right? I've never heard this officially, but recasting requirements. And realistically, all that is taking a look at the requirements that exist and now rewriting those requirements in a way that is going to be advantageous for your delivery. Does that make sense? You understand what I'm saying? So if you have this big thing that's going to take you 3-4 months to do, I want you now to take this thing and figure out how you can divide it into smaller pieces. But then it could be worse because you could have divided your requirements in a way that is more technical. Now you have a different problem to deal with. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to go back to the requirements still to figure out what can we do. Even if you got to development, I'm still going to go back and look at the requirements because the requirements impact your agility. Does that make sense? It has a huge impact on how you will move forward. Okay? So realistically, your requirements will shape everything else. So the first place I would take a look is with your requirements. Number 2 is I would pick a milestone. What do I mean by a milestone? A particular point in time, a particular event, a particular moment. I pick a point in time, maybe associated with the release. We get all this stuff through this particular release and then we'll go ahead and do something else. Switch up, do something different. Or it could be a date, but there's some milestone. And then I want you to make that transition at that particular time. What does that mean? Before that milestone happens, you need to do some preparation. The preparation is going to be key for you moving forward, right? It's going to be huge for you moving forward because you can start preparing for when that milestone is reached so then you can move forward in a more iterative, incremental way. Okay? So, number 1, recast your requirements. Number 2, deal with those milestones. The number 3 thing that I would say to you is to make sure that you get buy-in from all parties around you. There's some stakeholders that have an impact on you. Get buy-in from those folks. Get buy-in from the team. Pull them in and have them come up with ideas as well on how you can best make this transition. Because if they're involved in it, you're going to have reviews and retrospectives that will ultimately help you out. But that will help you actually move forward as one group. Okay? So realistically, if there were a few things that I would tell you to do, it would be 1, recast those requirements. 2, pick a milestone to make the transition. 3, buy in. And then if I have one final thing that I would say, if you have if you think it's going to impact your ability to deliver whatsoever, then don't do it. Don't do it. Wait till you get to a release or wait till you get to the logical end and then start newer stuff that way. If all this stuff is going to be a huge problem for you actually to do that work because it's just an administrative nightmare, then I would say don't do it whatsoever. Don't do it. Okay? So that being said, I wanted to make sure we got a quick hit on that conversation. If you have any questions about that topic or anything that you've been going through, look, drop it in a chat or come join me on the call-in show. I actually have someone here that's ready to join me right now, and I'm actually going to go ahead and pull them in. Maybe they made a mistake here. We going to see. I'm not sure. So let me go ahead and get this going and get ourselves squared up here. And then I'm going to say, John, hey, John, can you hear me, man? Unmute yourself. I just seem to always have this kind of issue with people. Wait a minute, let me make sure I can. Yeah, I can hear you. I can hear you. Talk to me, John. Say something. I don't hear you, man. Let me turn up. I know I heard. Let me see if I. Yeah, John. I think that's you, man. Let's see. Let me unmute. I unmuted. Have you unmuted yourself, John? Guest has muted themselves. That's what it says over here for me, that you muted yourself. Let me go ahead and click this and click this. No. How can I have this big time technology guy and I can't hear you? What's up with that, buddy? It says to me you muted. Guest has muted themselves. So we're going to have to figure this one out, John. I don't know. So do me a favor, John. Come back to me. So leave out, come back to me, and then let's try to deal with it. Let me hang up on John real quick. Yeah, John, that's my guy right there. That's my guy. That's my guy. We had a time. We had a time. We really did have a time. This is gonna be an interesting one, right? I know John don't really have a question. If he does, it's interesting. But we kind of worked together in the past. And John is really what. Look, John helped position me to be able to do what I'm doing today. But I'll tell you all about that in a minute, right? So let me try to get John here again, Mr. Healy, to join us. And let's try it one more time. Let's see. You was off mute just a second ago. Is it your headset that's muted? No? What the heck is the problem here? I had this happen before, and the guy had to leave out and come back in. I'm over here. Let's see. I'm clicking on everything I can click on, and I don't see it. Let me turn this down and turn it.
Does that one work okay?
That works fine. There you go. I can hear you fine. What's up,
okay,
man? Look at you.
So I was actually seeing it resonate on the little tester, but apparently you weren't hearing it. So I just changed the microphone to a different one.
There we go. John Healy. How are you, brother?
Hey, what's going on? Another day in paradise, man. I saw this and I knew that you were probably the only one that could address this question that I have on this topic, and I've had it for a while, actually.
You actually have a real question. So wait a minute. Before you ask your question, right? Let me get credit where credit is due, right? So I want y'all to hear this, right? Hear this and hear this. And this is how life kind of works sometimes, right? Back in the day, I'm an early Scrum Master. I'm talking way back in 2007. Literally, right? I actually have a great grandmother, right? She's paralyzed from the neck down. I have an emergency call from family telling me, go to San Antonio, you need to see your great grandmother before she dies, right? So I go there that weekend and bam, see her, I've done what I needed to do, everything's great. I came through San Antonio, left, I got family down there, I done conquered, I'll go back to Richmond, Virginia. Tuesday, after I get back, a guy named Richard Latcher, something like that, reached out to me Tuesday morning and said to me, I enjoyed working with you at Capital One. I really did. And I just want you to listen to these guys. That's what he says to me. I said, okay, Rick, I respect you. I will listen to these guys. And they called me and interviewed me that morning. Offered me the job that afternoon.
Oh, because we knew what we wanted. You was that.
2 weeks later, I'm in San Antonio, working at USA. So, thank you, sir. Because without all that, I wouldn't have got a gang of experience.
Well, the one thing that I learned from all of that, and it's been my life motto, if I don't have a passion and if I'm not enjoying what I'm doing, I shouldn't be doing it. Yeah. And I will tell you, just working with you that time gave me a reason to get up and make that journey to USA, because you never knew what we were going to be doing. Every day was something new, and that was the adventure.
Well, and let me say
So
this.
thank you very
I'm
much.
going to say this because I have to. Literally, I went in and I just did. And for people, some people really brand new to this, right? I went in and all I did was Scrum. That's it. They gave me 2 teams. They sat those teams right next to each other. Wasn't no perfect Scrum. I just delivered every 2 weeks something. Every 2 weeks we deliver something, and something happened with the teams.
You know, those teams are still iterating and releasing. Those 2 teams, literally,
Yes.
based off, they never stopped. And you know, if there was a way in a record book somewhere, right, for us to count releases, I would challenge anyone to go back, because that was in the early 2000s, right?
Yeah, that was 2007. 2007 is when
2007. So there you
deal,
go,
right? Here's
right?
the deal, John. What happened is they let go of like 14, 15 coaches after they saw that I was delivering, because those coaches was talking a bunch of stuff and wasn't delivering.
That's the difference.
And when they saw that I was delivering, like I shut my mouth, I was not bragging. And you realize, John, I was intimidated? Do you realize I was really intimidated? Like I had these people that was older than me, that's supposed to know all this stuff better than me. I was super intimidated. I just said, let me shut my mouth. Let me go in and do my job. And then that's when I was doing Scrum every day on myself. That's when I was doing that. And so they let go of all these coaches, and then there was like 3 of us left. And then we just kept moving. So thank you, sir. I appreciate you wholeheartedly.
Anytime.
We did
absolutely.
things. We did great things.
We did amazing things.
We did. I went to a 200-person portfolio at that point, and we delivered the first project where you can scan a check and deposit in the bank. That's what.
And so a lot of people don't realize this, is that the gentleman that you are looking at on the opposite side of the screen, that technology is standard now, where check by phone, right? You take a picture of your check and just deposit it. Yeah. The project that he's talking about was the project where we had the idea. It was just an idea on a white piece of paper. You fast forward till today, and it's just standard for every bank in the world to have that.
Absolutely.
Right? Check by phone.
And we were the first to make it happen, the first to do it, and USA owns the patent for it. So it's one of those things where it's like, you know, you don't know what you're getting into, and I didn't. Okay, so truth is, I didn't ask for that. You know,
right?
They just put me in good positions because I was doing my best, trying my hardest, had the passion, had no problem taking on every challenge and moving forward from there. So again, John.
I think the most important thing, though, is that we had fun. We enjoyed ourselves. We did. Seeing that output, and when you're in that retrospective and you're looking across the room and you can gauge people's satisfaction just off the smile on their faces, makes a world of difference, right?
It does.
And then they ask you to come back and do it again. Can you do that again? Because literally, what ended up happening across this organization was that people began knocking on our door because the word got out. We didn't advertise, we didn't publicize. In fact, truth be told, we had failed trying to implement Agile 2 times before. This was the 3rd strike. If we didn't do it this time, it wasn't going to happen. Yeah. So, you know, we had come in there and literally followed the playbook. Didn't talk, didn't brag. Here's how we're going to do this. Here's what we need. Now, it wasn't all easy. Don't get me wrong, right? I mean, there was a lot of hard work, but, you know, hats off. You did a great job.
Yeah, man. So anyway, I appreciate you is the point I'm making.
Yeah. Oh, ditto. Absolutely.
So anyway, so that's some of my lineage, and I need to let you all know. That's the reason why I had to. So I'm giving you those flowers right now, sir. So you got a question. What's your question?
I do.
And now here's the deal, John. You know you can always call me, right?
Oh yeah, I know. Yeah. And this is something that I've been, you know, writing about, pondering about, and actually wanting to focus and highlight this one particular part of the SDLC.
Okay.
And it has to do with not necessarily, you know, you want to call it architectural design, you might want to call it solution design. Yeah. But even, you know, when you tell people we're going to be an agile design-based type of SDLC, what ends up happening is that you'll be iterating and you'll need that design to understand what infrastructure you need. You'll need that design to understand which requirements needs to be prioritized. So the product owner, right, can go out and say, okay, well, based off of the design, here are the next steps, right?
Yeah.
Well, what I'm finding is that everyone in the core team, right? So everyone on the dev team, the product owner, the analyst, scrum master, is on board with doing with what our playbooks say, and ours are just basic Agile 101, right? Scrum 101. Well, the design, every single time, ends up being the roadblock that ends up extending, right? So we even have sprints now dedicated to that, just for that, right? And that's okay. But what I'm trying to understand, is it, because there's no standard, right? With requirements, you can say, I should, after you get to know your velocity, right, I should be able to deliver X amount in X time, so you can gauge that. But with the design, you just don't know, right? No. Because it's not measured anyway. So that's what I'm trying to figure out, is coming up with some sort of agile mechanism to allow our architects to be better engaged into the agile space. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me completely. What I would say, though, is really, really very simple. And unfortunately, there's no class on this. Those architects should be diving super deep into extreme programming, into continuous integration and continuous delivery. So they should be going to J.S. Humble and Martin Fowler, and those should be, pretty much the people that they look after for all those different things. I mean, continuous delivery, continuous integration, those two books take a great stab at it. Let's see, Kent Beck's original books in terms of that. And so what I found, John, that usually the issue for me has been architects and designers that aren't willing to think incrementally. Because
that's it.
And if you remember, and this is where they need to deal more in pragmatic programming, extreme programming, in those spaces. It's not even a Scrum thing or anything like that, because it's a mindset thing. When we did back in the day, John, and you remember this, when we did the MSR lab, Member Service Representative lab, for those that don't know, we brought the best minds in a room, and we had no problem iteratively building a whole second production environment. Right? Because they built a whole second production environment, and everything wasn't known up front. Yeah, you got to move some big levers for sure, but everything wasn't done up front. And the thing that I found, John, is really probably super important, is usually for me, design ideas happen faster when you got the right minds working together. Most of the design problems that really are happening is slowed down because you keep having meetings instead of going to the whiteboard to go figure it out and make those minds actually bang it together. So if I go back and look at what we did in the MSR lab, is kind of where I learned it at, is really getting them to a whiteboard and having the people who got the knowledge sit there and bang that design out. And we're talking about hours and not days at this point. Because once you have that artifact right there, it's still something that they're seeing every day. And then what ends up happening is somebody looks at it one day and say, you know what? I'm thinking this needs to change. And now they're having another 15-minute powwow about it. And they've iterated on it again. Because even in Waterfall or architecture that is, big things, it's still iterative. Something changes along the way.
Sure.
I would say to you, that's a mindset problem over anything else. Now,
that's what I thought.
I haven't seen it not be that way, because I have people that do it very well, and then I have those people that can't make the leap at all. At all.
Sure.
And so now the question is, with your people, can you, or do you have people? You know what? Here's an idea. Here's an idea. You know how in our large companies we have all the COBOL folks, the mainframe folks.
Yeah. The Rack F folks from '70s. Yeah.
Yeah. They were actually doing this back in the day, because Waterfall wasn't around until 1980.
Right.
Prior to Waterfall, they were doing iterative incremental development, right? The first iterative incremental development, I forget the name of it, is like from the 1960s. So my statement is, I guarantee you, if you got some of those guys in there in the room with them and said what the objective was,
that's a good idea.
In a more iterative incremental way, I guarantee you that those guys will be able to do it, because the problem is the people that was trained after the 85, 90s, stuff like that, if they were in these large companies, they had the luxury to be able to think in big swaths. However, people that's in those environments that live that kind of life, they actually think differently, and since those systems are already built, they have to think incrementally in continuing to keep the system in place and rebuild and adding to it. So I have always found, strangely enough, the COBOL assembler guys, if you move beyond much younger guys, because much younger guys, like the ones that have learned this in school,
sure,
get it a little bit better, right? But you're not talking about those people. You're really talking about other people who have more stake, right? So what I would say to you fundamentally is grab those guys. Grab those new school guys. Grab those new school guys, and then kind of
put them together,
and say what the objective is. We're gonna clean this up. This is a living document. This is a living entity. It's a living artifact, and let them just start to just hash it out and work it out.
Right. And that's exactly what it'll do.
The environment for it as well, John, because if you give them a space where they can put this, and then nobody messes with that space, they can always use that as a place to brainstorm, like a war room, right? That would actually be very helpful for them. So
that's a good idea, actually, because these people, and see, I knew it was more of a state of mind issue than anything else, because the additional thing that I know you were thinking is that generally this community of architects and solution design people are very senior in the organization, right? And are looked at as people that drive leadership. And so therefore, oftentimes, just like with stakeholders, right? It's the same problem with senior leadership and stakeholders. Unless you get their buy-in into scrumming and even Kanbaning, just anything that has to do with delivering incremental value, it becomes a challenge, because they just don't feel that artifact, as we said, could be broken down into consumable chunks that add value over time, when in fact you and I both know the contrary is true, and you can't.
And here's the question I would ask, right? What if you ran an experiment? What if you ran an experiment and you said to them, we want to, I got a set of requirements, and that set of requirements is going to take roughly a month to do. Can you build an architecture that would support only this release, like it's the only thing that we're doing?
Sure.
Then the question becomes, the bigger questions that they'll start to have is how robust the system needs to be.
Right. Scale and
everything.
So it's funny you say that, because that's what I ended up doing. Was not giving them, because they weren't participating in stand-ups. They weren't participating. It was just call and knock on my door when you need us. So I was only giving them that small chunk, right? And then they would deliver it. I would come back to them next week and say, oh, guess what? We had a change request.
Yeah.
And here are some more requirements, right? And then they would scale it, and scale it. Now, doing it like that is a real backdoor approach, but it still gets the job done,
But it's the
right?
same. But it's the same. But it's the same thing that you would do
It
if
gets
you
it
was
done.
front doing it. So,
Yeah,
that right there. So you've already run that experiment. So that's worked.
yeah.
The question I'd have for you is this: do you have data that shows that it worked?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely.
So now, can you use that data to further the conversation with the other architects that aren't that interested? Because there's an advantage to what you did because you got an opportunity to learn and test the architecture.
Yeah, and that's an excellent idea. I didn't think about that. That's exactly what I'll do. I'll make that a point because you can't debate data, right?
You can't,
Especially it's from trusted source of record. You can't, right? You can't. Yeah,
and
that's what I'm going to do.
And the learnings, because the idea is that they learn something every time you gave them a new set of requirements, they learn something that they wouldn't have been able to take the advantage of until the end of a waterfall project.
Right. And see, everyone learns. I just learned so they can learn. Right.
But we had that. But we had the problem back in the day. We had the problem back in USA, man. We had that problem.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
Together.
I remember that.
So it
yeah.
is a classic problem, but they need to be trained to think in an iterative way.
Right. Because they don't know how. So that's just it, and unless you do what I like to call the Jedi mind trick on them, like we just talked about, feeding them those bits, right? It's and specifically because they're not in my organization, right? They are a kind of knock on their door and come in, right? And so, yeah. Absolutely. Thank you I'm going to do that. I took some notes down here while you were talking, and so
so
that
you
data
let me
is
know
going to
how it went, man. Yes or no?
Oh, absolutely. I got to call you and talk about a couple of offline things anyway. But absolutely.
Just hit me, John. Hit me anytime, man. So you got your question.
You'll hear from me tomorrow,
brother.
Check, Roger.
All right then. I'll see you. Call me soon, man.
You got it.
All right, man. I'll talk to you later.
Later.
Thanks, bro.
Take care.
Let's see. That was amazing. I enjoyed that. Hopefully some of you all enjoyed that. That was a little bit deeper, but I enjoyed that because I've worked with John before, and that's just a good. That's a good question. Oh man. Anyway, anyone with any questions, please go ahead and drop the question in the chat. Or you're welcome to do exactly what John just did. Click on the link and then join us. I'll drop the link in the chat for everyone once again. No need to be afraid or anything like that. I don't bite anybody. But that was amazing. Because I'm a past developer, right? And so I have like a developer mindset. And so I always love talking about extreme programming or architecture, feature flags, all these different things. I like talking about that kind of stuff because it's something that I definitely can't really do anymore. I don't deal with production code anymore. I stopped doing that a long time ago. But it's just the most interesting thing. So it's just a beautiful conversation to have. And I like having conversations like that. And the beauty of John showing up and not dropping that in the chat is we got the opportunity to exchange, because I don't know if I'd have been able to answer that question correctly for him if he had not joined the call. So that's one of those benefits that I really love about this format here, and I get excited, as you can see. So that's a good thing. So anyway, on that note, some of the things that you may not have heard, or at least that we spoke about when we said SDLC. You talk about solution design life cycle, but software development life cycle is the classic thing that people would have heard about. If you don't know what XP is, I'm talking about extreme programming, which has several practices associated with it. If you don't know anything about let me repeat that. If you're working in software development and you don't know anything about extreme programming, you're doing yourself a disservice, right? One of the things that a Kanban or a Scrum does not do for you, or even agile as a set of values and principles, they don't give you some of that how kind of stuff, right? They really don't. Not in terms of the life cycle that you're building. They don't give you any of that, right? And so if you're doing software stuff, extreme programming is kind of the place to go. And unfortunately, I don't have my bookshelf around me because I'm in a different room, but I'm going to move on to another space, within the next couple of weeks and get that stuff back so I can just grab a book off the shelf and show it to you, right? But just so you know, continuous delivery. J.S. Humble. I don't know who else wrote it. He used to work at ThoughtWorks. Look up a guy named Martin Fowler, Fowler. He's one of the signers on the Agile Manifesto. Most of his stuff is great. Kent Beck's book, original book on extreme programming. It's a little dated now, but it's still an amazing book. There's another book on XP that I've lost sight of right now. And so, yeah, you gotta ask me about that at some future point in time. But yeah, there's good information out there, and architecture is definitely something that you gotta have a little bit of lean thinking around. You gotta make sure that you have ways to validate what you're doing instead of thinking about everything in such big swaths. So I am in just let me go back. John, welcome. Again, anyone would like to join, you know how to join. Drop your question in the chat. If you like that conversation, give me a thumbs up. Give me a smile. Like this video. Drop some in the chat. Just tell me you enjoyed it, so I know that you're out there, because I just had an amazing time. Let me tell you something. I'm going to go back to the introduction that I made with John so you all understand. I probably spent at USAA, I probably spent 2-3 years of my life there. 2 different stints, but 2 to 3 years of my life, right? And what I would say to you, for me being a younger Scrum Master at that time, it was the most helpful thing that ever happened to me. Working for a big company allowed for me to run a lot of experiments. It allowed for me to do a lot of different things, right? It allowed for me to be on a lot of teams. It allowed for me to work on a lot of the hardest things. One of the things that people always say about me is I'm always one of the most enthusiastic people that are inside of a particular organization. There's no challenge that I'm unwilling to face. I'm always willing to go. I'm always willing to take it head on, and just go after those challenges, because the one thing I know is that I'm normally scared when I'm walking into it. Sometimes I get imposter syndrome like everybody does. But the one thing that I know is I'm going to learn. I'm going to grow. Even with the hardest things, I'm going to grow. And it can be a little bit of emotional labor, right? Where my emotions are at one place and I don't feel like doing this thing. It can be a little bit of emotional labor. But the idea is that I get the opportunity to grow. And having the opportunity to grow, especially as a younger Scrum Master, Agile coach, change agent, change analyst, whatever you want to call it, it's amazing, right? It's amazing, because that right there is what's going to give you the story. So a lot of people say to me, hey, I want to become a trainer. Yeah, I'm a certified Scrum trainer. I want to become a trainer like you. Go get your stories first. Go get your experience first, right? Go get that stuff first, and that's going to help you out, right? There's no way that I could have just came out of my brain with what I just told John if it wasn't for the experience. Does that make sense? So very, very important that you get that experience, right? So super important. All right, so let's see. Okay, wait a minute. I got somebody joining me again, so let's go ahead and pull them in. Let's get you going here. I got another John. Hey, how you doing?
Hey, doing well. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you just fine. You sound perfect.
Hey,
you came
good.
in perfect. So you have a question. What's your question?
God, I had to close the YouTube channel there, getting the double feedback.
I understand.
So I got a few questions.
Yeah.
I came in with one, and then you opened up a bunch of you opened up a Pandora's box.
Okay, good. I like that.
So just real quick, I took the Scrum Master certification course with you back in September,
Mm-hmm.
and I got certified, implemented agile on 2 of my teams,
Mm-hmm.
and you went and gave me more work. They gave me another project, so now I'm on 3 projects implementing
Yeah.
Scrum,
Uh-huh.
wearing multiple hats. And the latest project that they got me on, and this is actually perfect because I'm coming in the middle of a program increment, in the middle of a sprint,
Yeah.
um, and just to give you an idea of what I'm working with,
Mm-hmm.
there was no functional requirements documentation.
Oh, okay.
There was requirements are coming in on the fly
Okay.
from different stakeholders. Um, there's no vetting process. They're just
Mm-hmm.
thrown into the backlog.
Okay.
My developers love to just so this is a software development project.
Uh-huh.
We're throwing user stories from one sprint to the next.
Mm-hmm.
I've got backlog items that have been in 4 sprints now,
Mm.
and um, I am trying to reorient, change the culture to more Scrum like. Uh, I'm in Scrum, but as you
Yeah.
used to
Yeah.
say,
Yeah.
which
Yeah.
isn't Scrum. But
Yeah.
so I guess my question in this case is, I'm changing cultures. I
Mm.
have to change behaviors.
Yeah.
I have to um, figure out how to get these user stories down to bite-sized pieces that can actually be completed
Mm-hmm.
within the sprint. Um, It's a lot. It's a lot. My
It's
other
too
2
much.
projects are yeah,
It's too
yeah,
much.
they're sailing now. My other 2 projects, they're good. They're almost handling themselves.
Okay. I have
But
a question
this
for you.
one
Let me
is,
have, let me ask you a
yeah,
question, right?
go ahead, go ahead.
Okay, so the first thing I need you to do is take your personal feelings out of this one, right? Take your personal feelings out of it, okay? What I want you to do immediately is have a retro, okay? Now I want you to have a retro because I need you to get them to give you buy-in for what we're gonna fix first.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense? Because
Yeah, and
what you have is a bunch of people that's resisting you already. And they're gonna resist this whole Scrum thing because I was gonna say to you when you initially told me what you told me, why don't you just do Kanban and just forget it, and just track
yeah,
cycle time and then use cycle time to help you improve. But let's stick with this Scrum thing for a minute. So here's the reason why, and I want you to write this down because this is really important. Your objective of the retrospective is to come out with a prioritized list of the problems that you already know exist.
mm-hmm.
Okay? You see them,
But get them to say it.
get them to say it. Okay? Now, that means that they're gonna say a few things and it's gonna be lovely, right? Now, I don't know, when you took the class with me, did I give you my retrospective? Like the way I do a retrospective.
I
I
I
take this
can't
5-step
recall.
process and da 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 da.
Uh,
Okay, so let's talk about the real quick. Let's talk about this little retrospective thing so you understand, right? Because I
mhm.
want you to do this and I want you to do this correctly. Okay, and this is like John said, Jedi mind tricks, right?
Sure.
So when I walk into a retrospective, realistically, it's about me facilitating and not being a part of it. Okay, so I make it very clear that I'm on the outside of it, and it's going to be more about them. Now,
Mhm.
I'm gonna assume that you got a product owner that don't have no power or really ain't got much to say right now. Okay, so that's my assumption in all this because otherwise you'd have way more control on what's coming in, right? So here's what I do. I follow a 5-step process. I'm gonna give you these 5 steps real quick. They're from a book called Agile Retrospectives by Diane Larson and Esther Derby. So get the book, okay? The first
book.
step is to set the stage. The second step is to gather data. The third step is to generate insight. The fourth step is to decide what to do. And the fifth step is to close. Okay? Now, you can mix and match things inside of each one of those steps, but let me give you what I would do, and then you can modify this as you choose. Are you all meeting physically at this point, or you're still virtual?
We are predominantly virtual, and even when we do meet, we have scattered offices and
Okay.
things like that.
All right, so here's what I want you to do, and you may have to find a tool, and I don't know what the right tool is today. I would think a mural, something like one of those tools that allows people to collaborate. You can utilize if you all have access to that. Prior to those tools being around, I would just use a Google Sheet because a Google Sheet has cell level locking and not sheet-based locking. So anyway, whatever tool, you pick it, figure it out. Just make sure you take the time to understand that tool before you put everybody into it. The first step is set the stage. And normally for me, I want everybody in the room to say one word. I find that when you get everybody to say something, they will talk more later, right? What I do to get them to all say one word is I say, something like this. You're driving down the street in your absolute favorite car, top is down, what's the weather like outside, based on how the sprint went. And boom, everybody gonna have something to say, right? I don't really care what they say. It doesn't matter what they say. You can say, hey, let's do a temperature check on a scale of 1 to 10. Based on how the sprint went, what number would you give? And then you can take all those numbers, add them together, and come out with an average. And then you can use that average from sprint to sprint to sprint to see if the temperature goes up, right?
Okay.
Different things you can do, right? What I would do next is I would just do goods and bads, or moving on to the next step. The next step is gathering data. This is where you want to get them to tell you the problems, right? And so what you want to do is I typically do prouds and sorries, which is found in that book. It's just a version of goods and bads. And what I would do if I was you is I would say, hey, there are wonderful things that you are proud about. If you think about it from a sticky standpoint, in the real world, I would give everybody stickies. In mural, you can give them stickies like this. And they can write on a sticky and put that under a thing called prouds. Does that make sense? So you can use that tool to help simulate this. Or if you're in a Google Sheet, you can actually just create a column and they just add it to the columns, right? And what I would ask them is I would say, hey, there are wonderful and great things that happen during this sprint. I want you to write one per sticky. I want you to put in one thing per sale. Just one thing, okay? And let them come up with their list of goods. And then you're gonna say, there are some things that didn't go so well in the sprint, and let them come up with their list of bads. Same idea, one per sticky, one per sale, whatever tool you're using, right? The idea is you want to separate these ideas out. Now, you just generated a bunch of data at this point. The problem is, it's just a bunch of data. I never go to the prouds because I don't normally have time to get to the prouds. So I'm gonna move into the sorries, and I'm going to start to generate some insight around the sorries. I'm gonna do what's called an affinity grouping. And an affinity is grouping like things. Does that make sense? Grouping like things. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take one of those stickies, right? I'm gonna grab that sticky, I'm gonna read it to the team. They're gonna be, if you're virtual, they're gonna all be able to see it, right? We're gonna read this. And then I'm gonna say, hey y'all, this falls in a particular category or topic, or basically there's a root cause for this. What's the root cause for this? And let them tell me. Nope, John, I am not telling them what the root is. Do you understand that distinction?
Right.
Let them tell you what the root is. Now take this sticky and put it under that category, under that root cause. Okay? Then you go through all the rest of the bads and you do the same thing until they're all under their separate things, because this is going to help you get rid of duplicates and consolidate items as well. Does that make sense? Because some of them will say the same thing, right? So now you have these columns that exist of root causes for problems that exist. What I need you now to do is you're not done generating insight, because I want you to do something else that's really important. I want you to say to them, look, we are not going to focus on the problems. We're going to focus on the root.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to focus on the root. And here's what I want you to do. I want everybody to get some more stickies, and I want you to come up with things that solve those root problems that can be done in a sprint or less. Now, note, John, who's coming up with all the solutions now?
Developers, the team.
You see that distinction? I'm making sure that I remain the facilitator, and I'm going to make sure that they're coming up with those things, so they're going to have more ownership at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now I have a list of problems, and next to that list of problems, I have a list of solutions. And I would separate them out by telling them to use a different color sticky in some kind of way, or designate a particular color for solutions, whatever you want to do, or write the word solution at the top of it. Because the thing is that they're going to come up with some similar solutions too. They just are. Because you're going to give them time to do these things. Make sure you give them a little bit of time, and every person time to do that. Now you have a list of solutions. Great. Here's the deal. Everybody don't know what everybody wrote. So the next step is to decide what to do. And here's what I'm doing as a Scrum Master. I'm going to go and look at each category, each root cause, and I'm going to start off with the one that has the most solutions, and then work my way down. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So you're gonna knock out the not necessarily the biggest problems, but
The most ideas that's associated with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can switch that, and if there was a bigger problem, you can start however you decide to start. I just tend to start with the one that has the most, because normally that's the bigger problem. So what I would do then is I would read each one to them. Every one of them in that category. And if there was one that was like another one, that gives us another place to consolidate or get rid of duplicates. Does that make sense? And here's what I'm going to ask them every time I read one. I'm going to say, hey, y'all, is this thing in your control or not in your control? Anything that's not in their control, John, I'm taking off that board and putting them in another section.
Okay.
I'm going to call that section the escalation section. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So now the only thing that's left on your board, because now you removed all the things that they don't have any control of. So the only things that are left at this point is things that they do have control over. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say to you, now you really decide what to do. I'm going to give every single person, we're going to do what's called a multi-vote. A multi-vote is not just a vote, it's where you give people multiple votes, right? So I'm going to say to everybody, you have 3 votes. You can take your 3 votes and put it on one of those cards, one of those solutions, or you can take them and spread them across. What do you think is the most important thing for us to get done in the next sprint?
Mm-hmm.
And then you give them a few minutes to go ahead and vote. And these tools normally have stickers or something that you can do everybody can do to put it on those kind of things. So you make sure they got the ability to do that. And then give them 5 minutes, let them put them all there. Obviously, the one that has the most votes is going to go to the top.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't even worry about that at this point, because now I have the data. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to move on beyond this and say, we're going to talk about these things in sprint planning. We're not going to talk about them right now. We're going to talk about these things in sprint planning, because you have 2 advantages. One, they voted on them, so you know what's most important to them. And 2, it's in their control. And 3, they're small enough to be completed in a single sprint. I'm bringing the sprint planning. To close the retrospective out, I always close out with shout outs. If something wonderful and great happened during that sprint, say what happened, call them out, give a shout out, and we move on from there. You always close on a good note, because whatever you end with floats into the next sprint. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, here's the deal. When sprint planning comes, you're gonna plan some items, and you're gonna make sure you tell everybody 10% of our time is going toward improvements.
Mm-hmm.
So I need you all to select from this list here. What do you all think is the most important thing for us to work on in this particular sprint? If you feel like we can work on more than one of them, then we can select more than one of them and put an owner on it. Not you, because
Mm-hmm.
these are things that are in their control. And that thing has to make it to the done column by the end of the sprint.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So now they're cleaning up the Scrum process, and you know what's the most important things to work on, and you can take care of the things that was on the escalation board
Gotcha.
outside of the room,
Okay. That was my next question.
right? You take care of those outside of the room. Some of those things you're gonna take to management and be like, we're never changing that. Just get over it. Then you go back to the team and say, they're never changing this. Let's get over it. Okay? So let's not complain about this no more because it ain't gonna change. And you start taking care of those things in the background as they're taking on their improvement and they're doing their work. Now you got their commitment in doing these things. Now you got them more excited about the opportunity, about the retro, about them moving forward with this whole Scrum thing. Because the moment that they get time to do things is the moment that they get more excited, because they'll start saying things like, you know, I don't have clean enough requirements. Okay, well, there's some that we have control over, and then there's some that we don't. So then where can we make sure that we get cleaner requirements coming through the door? Maybe we just set up a weekly meeting so then we can approve them before they come into a sprint. I don't know what that is. You all can figure that out. But does that make sense? So you see where I'm going. I'm saying to you, improve through having retrospectives.
Mm-hmm. Get the buy-in. Make them own it.
Make them own it, man. Make them own it, because you just have a situation where you just got too many things going on. And with too many things going on,
Right.
something's going to fall, man, and then it's going to be a blame on you. And you don't want to force them to do something that they're not really ready to do. They think they're doing Scrum. And that's okay. We're going to help them do better Scrum. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so instead of switching the process and say, forget this, let's do Kanban, and everybody's frustrated. No. You're the best guy in the building and know Scrum. Now go be the best guy in the building and know Scrum. But empower them to do it. Empower them to make the change. And then as they see things are changing, it's just that when they commit to a change, make sure that they're realistic about it and make sure that it actually happens.
Right.
Because when they see that thing make it to done, when they see that this improvement actually happened, they're going to be like, hey, let's get another one.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Snowball effect.
That's the key, man, because you have to remember that you're not in it by yourself. You're not by yourself. There's none of them developers love working on something that they're excited about working on, and they're changing on them immediately.
Right.
None of them. Right? They didn't get a chance to finish, but they switching, and then they got to come back to that, and then their mind is someplace else. So context switching is not the greatest of things, and most of them are just asking for time to get the job done. So realistically, get their buy-in by working through it with them, and then you'll be perfectly fine. So that's how I would handle it if I'm you. Does that help?
Yeah. Absolutely. I have a meeting tomorrow with some stakeholders and the senior dev, senior architect, and we're gonna take a shot at prioritizing some of our higher level requirements. We're really working on our customer demo tomorrow, because that's this Thursday the sprint closes, and we're doing our bi-weekly review. And then I think that leaves
The sprint
Friday
closes, so
for
when is the sprint retro?
that will be Friday.
Okay, yeah,
Uh,
there you go.
So
You be ready to go completely. Just make sure you take time to practice the tool. So you're not fumbling. So pick a tool, practice the tool, get all that stuff set up before you pull them in to it, and then go from there. Make sure you do all that pre-work. It's going to take you some hours to do that seriously. So don't pretend.
yeah, and you know, just to make sure I don't fumble it, I might use my other projects that I'm more familiar and comfortable with, just to as a guinea pig. try out this particular methodology, and I'll let you know how it goes.
Yeah, let me know, man. Let me know. It looked like I hit you
Yeah.
with too much immediately.
No, I'm man. I just got my kids to bed, so if I'm
Okay.
tired, that's why.
I understand. I understand. I understand the whole
Yeah.
kids thing. I can relate. So, John, did you have anything else?
Uh, no, I think this is enough to chew on
Yeah,
for
it is.
now, and I have user stories I got to update, so
Okay.
I'll have you on my second monitor here, and I'll still be here
Oh no,
for
no,
the
we
rest of
we
the ride.
we
But
we about to shut the show down, man. We didn't did our
oh,
hour,
okay,
so we're good to go. But John, I appreciate it. You know, you always welcome back. You have any questions? Let me know how it goes. Okay, when you do that first retro, let me know how it goes because I probably got some tips for you.
awesome. I'll take good notes.
Okay, you do that. I'll talk to you soon, brother.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Have a good
Appreciate
one.
your time.
No problem. People, look at us. We done gone over time. But I got a question in the chat, at least one of the chats, right? So I wanna just jump here real quick. Any tips on dealing with a PO that's in way over their head, doesn't understand priority, doesn't like to write stories, is detrimental to the team as a scrum master? How can I help the team here? You help the team by helping the product owner. That's how you help the team. You literally, if they're over their head, okay, here's what my best piece of advice to you. If they're over their head, then focus on one sprint. Focus on one sprint. Let's get everything ready for this, whatever future sprint, this sprint up here, so we can make sure that everything is ready to go. And then what I would do to you is set up, make sure we're having a weekly story, what I'm going to call a refinement meeting. Story refinement meeting. And I bring the entire team in that refinement meeting, and I would have us look at those stories that have been written, so then those stories can get feedback. That way, you're going to start training that product owner on how to write stories, how to make these stories cleaner so they can get through the pipeline a little bit faster. But focus on a sprint at a time. Most product owners, if you're able to focus on a sprint, you're able to focus on a few stories with them. I've been known, the first thing I do is go grab product owners. And if you go grab them and you work with them, you hold their hand through the process, then they'll start to move forward with you. So that's probably the tip that I can give you off the top of my head. I know we're over time. If you want to talk about that more, Jack Magley later. I'd love to do it. Other than that, everybody, this has been a pleasure. This has been a pleasure for me. I got to reminisce a little bit today. I literally got to reminisce a little bit today. Next week, I don't know what we're talking about, but next week we're going to be right here doing the same thing. So everybody, I'm going to say good night to you. I'm over here looking around. I'm going to say good night to you. This has been a pleasure. You all just have an amazing week, man. Have an amazing week. Do some great stuff, and let's talk about it some point later. So bring your questions next week. Bring whatever you have. I'm going to be ready for you. I'm going to be excited here. Thank you again. This was amazing. I'll talk to you all later. Peace, everybody. See you later.